The next matter would be Dr. Harvey Adelson, DDS, case number 2015-09091. And Dr. Fapney and Dr. Thomas are recused. And Dr. Adelson, before you have a seat, kindly be sworn in, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. And Counselor, again, since I served, you can either ask me to step aside or I could continue to preside.
We'll continue with you,
Thank
sir.
you.
We're on a roll.
Thank you. Right,
And my name is Randolph Collette. I'm with the Doctors Company here on behalf of Dr. Adelson.
Thank you. Prosecution?
This is Department of Health versus Harvey Adelson, DDS, case number 2015-09091. This is coming before the board as a settlement agreement, and there are 2 counts in the administrative complaint alleged that the respondent violated section 466.0281X Florida statutes for being guilty of incompetence or negligence by failing to meet the minimum standard of performance in diagnosis and treatment when measured against the generally prevailing peer performance, and section 466.0281M Florida statutes by failing to keep written dental records and medical histories justifying the course of treatment of the patient. The terms of the settlement agreement include appearance before the board, a reprimand to the license, an administrative fine of $7,500 to be paid within 12 months of the final order, costs in the amount of $3,631.04 to be paid within 12 months of the final order, continuing education courses to be taken within 12 months of the final order in exodontia level 1, which is a 3 to 6 hour course with a demonstration of achieved competency, diagnosis and treatment 3 to 6 hour course level 1 to be taken at and these courses are to be taken at an accredited college of dentistry or through a board approved continuing education provider, and the laws and rules examination within 12 months of the final order.
Thank you. Defense counsel?
Yes, sir. Just would like to point out for everyone's benefit that this is Dr. Adelson's first appearance before the board in his career of 47 years of practicing dentistry. And Dr. Adelson is available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Board members, any questions of Dr. Adelson or counsel? Yes, Dr. Peter.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just had a question. What was the reason you extracted 18?
I extracted one tooth, and the tooth was periodontally involved, had 8 millimeter pockets, mesial and distal. The tooth had an occlusal restoration that was defective. It had recurrent decay, and the tooth was not in function. And I had explained the patient to that. I even wrote the patient a letter because the patient asked me, why were you doing it? And so I wrote the letter. The day that I extracted it, I personally read him the consent form. My consent form was a bullet form. It explained everything that could possibly happen. And ironically, he questioned me. He said, what about you have here a fracture? I said, well, I've never had anything like that happen, but it could happen. Unfortunately, it happened.
Now, also in your notes or the material we got said that you had treated it with Arrestin and it resolved to 4 to 5 millimeters.
That note was erroneous. When you look at my periodontal chartings, what happened was I have a Dentrix software system, and the perio charting is separate. You have to pull that together. So I didn't pull that together when they were, when the case was in mediation. When I started to read the review of what I had done, I said, oh, wow, we don't have the old chartings. And that's when I requested another review of the case, because if you look at the chartings that this man had, he still had an 8 millimeter pocket. He had the hygienist's note was a general note that he was getting periodontal improvement in the rest of his mouth, not in that one particular tooth.
And was that tooth mobile at all? Obviously
I didn't
not.
understand that.
Was it mobile?
Is the tooth mobile?
It wasn't mobile, was it? Obviously.
Oh, it wasn't.
So it was non-functional, not hurting. It just had the pocketing.
Well, he was diabetic. He had a history of diabetes. He had a 6 millimeter pocket on the distal of the adjacent tooth. And I said to him he had mesial root caries on tooth number 18. He had a faulty occlusal amalgam restoration that had recurrent decay. And I said, it would be in your general health if I took the tooth out. And he agreed to the treatment. He signed the consent form. He agreed to it.
Thank you. Dr. TJ?
When was the most recent radiograph of that tooth prior to extracting?
There's a Panorex in history, and there's bite wings that I think are, I have to look on the exact notes, but I think there were a few months, because this happened in 11. And it happened in 12. The bite wing x-rays are, I think, 11. I think in December of 11.
But the Panorex was in 2005, correct? According to the notes?
I have to look at that. I can't.
So you had bite wings. Did you have a full mouth series or just bite wings?
Initially on the patient, we had a full mouth series.
I understand, but it looks like in the record that the Panorex or anything that showed the apices of that root of number 18 was back in 2005. What you had were bite wings of number 18, which does not show, correct me if I'm wrong, apices of tooth number 18 that were recent prior to extracting that tooth. And as we know, standard of care is to obtain x-rays with periapical that extends to the apices of the roots prior to extraction of a tooth. That's standards of care across
Can't
the
answer the
boards.
question about the Panorex. I
Right.
have to look on the notes.
Well, I will tell you, it's 2005.
Okay.
Okay. And so you attempted an extraction of a tooth without having a recent x-ray that showed the apices of the tooth. So I understand you said there was a 6 millimeter pocket of the adjacent tooth and the distal 8 millimeter pockets, both mesial and distal, of this tooth, but you had no picture of the apices of this tooth, which is the most important. You have to have a recent x-ray. I don't extract teeth without having a recent x-ray. And when patients show up to my office with one that's inadequate, I obtain one without charging the patient.
I also did the same thing.
Okay. But on this day, you did not.
I didn't.
And then, the force that is required to break a mandible is pretty significant. And I can tell you because I fixed those that come in these instances. And in my 17-year career, I've not broken a mandible. You get to a point where it becomes a feel that you understand that 301 elevator or that cow horn or that lower universal or whatever your weapon of choice is, you stop and then you perform an ostectomy on the tooth, or you actually split the mesial and distal roots before you remove that. So it is a pretty excessive type of force that you have to apply to break a mandible, because I fixed many of them. For counsel, was this indemnified?
Yes. 200,000.
And what was the
200,000.
200?
So, any other questions from board members? Yes, Dr. Cook.
Yeah, just to our attorneys, you had mentioned the settlement was a letter of reprimand.
No,
In my notes, it says concern,
it's a letter of concern.
just for the record.
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? Dr. TJ?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, kindly signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Only thing I didn't get, and I apologize, what were the actual costs? I know it said in the settlement.
The actual costs were over the,
Okay, perfect. I could read that.
it was, no, I'm sorry. The actual cost came to $3,644.94, but the settlement calls for no more than $3,631.04.
Excellent. So it'll be $3,631.04. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to ask. So I would answer the question. Is this normal? You guys do
Okay, the next one would